you. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you all for being here. I'm grateful. I decided to sit, so I didn't do that. Thank you. Well, also thank you to a friend who is on stage with me. She's a friend. She's a fellow artist. She's my colleague. She's been my inspiration and a source of laughter and compassion throughout my journey and the work we are doing together today. Abernathy Bland. Okay, so I feel really excited to have this chance to share my story and what's happening at Milk River Arts with so many really cool people. I also feel really afraid, and not afraid for being awkward or emotional, because that's gonna happen. That's just what I do. But also, I'm really afraid of saying the wrong thing or using words that might unintentionally hurt someone's feelings, or looked back on someday as being like the wrong word to use, because I'm going to be talking about people. That's what we're talking about when we think about inclusive. And I think the words that we choose when we talk about one another are really important. And I think maybe some of you share this fear with me of saying the wrong thing. I think it's what happens when we see someone or get really nervous that we might have to interact with someone maybe who has an obvious disability, or someone who we don't know right away if they're male or female, or someone whose skin color is different than our own. Yeah, I haven't always been afraid of saying the wrong thing. What used to keep me up at night, the word infinity. That loopy, sideways figure 8 symbol that means forever. I remember when I first heard that word, I was curled up next to my big sister in my Scooby-Doo sleeping bag, and we were in our backyard camping out for the night, looking up at the night sky and talking about the stars and looking for constellations. And I asked her, what happens after the sky? And so she, explained about the Milky Way and other galaxies, and that, of course, led to, what comes after that? And she freaked me out so bad when she was like, well, it just keeps going, forever. I did not sleep for weeks. I didn't get it. My head didn't understand it then. And if I'm really honest, I still don't really, I'm not able to incorporate the concept and really understand infinity, but I've managed to shape a life that is fine without me being able to live understanding what infinity, right? It doesn't so much matter to my life, and it certainly doesn't matter that I don't understand infinity in other people's lives. And that's not true about the word inclusive. What keeps me up now is what I think, well, what I know so many of us are waking up to. These questions, really important questions like, how do we right the injustices that we have created? And how do we move in ways that really honor the truth that we're all different and we're all here. In all our humanness, we're here. Okay, so here are some words that inspire me. I found them on a piece of art that Abby created. And the words are, you don't choose where you're born. You choose where you reach. I was born in the Midwest. I grew up in Chicago. And when I came to Richmond to attend the University of Richmond. And while I was there, my last year there, my parents moved from Chicago to the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I was pretty sure that I was going to take my degree and fly out there and land some fabulous job in advertising and find a really cool apartment in the heart of the city. And that didn't happen. So I came back to Richmond and I got a job and I've got a place in the fan. I actually got lots of jobs and I met a lot of friends and I made a family and built a life here in Richmond. And just before I turned 40 years old, I was offered a job at the Visual Arts Center of Richmond on Main Street. And I think about those years, and I just like to describe those years as feeling like the most glorious spider in the center of a magical web. And it was just a web, meaning like just full of connections. I made so many connections to people who called themselves artists. And I found myself there in that place and through that work, and I discovered the artist in me there. Okay, so when you work around artists, being around them, working with them, I discovered that it is really hard to be a professional artist. It's so true that the more time you spend on that thing you're trying to make great, the better it gets. And artists usually have to spend a lot of time not like just doing other stuff that's not their own work just to make a living. And like many of you, I think the reason we're all here in this room is that we all believe that we're all creative, right? And if you don't believe that you're creative, I really encourage you to spend time around people you think are creative, because they're going to tell you, they're going to figure out and tell you what makes you uniquely you, what's creative about you. So yes, we're all creative. There are really only some of us that are born into this calling to be an artist. Like, if you're born an artist, you are an artist. it's what you do. Making stuff is what you have to do. It's like breathing. So I would often travel back to San Francisco to visit my parents, and one of the things I still love to do is take the BART into the city and plop out someplace and get a little lost. I like getting lost. I like the feeling of being a little lost and figuring my way out. And on one of my visits into the city, I was in the Mission District and saw a sandwich board out front of a gallery that was just kooky and cool looking, and it was in front of a place called Creativity Explored. And when I went inside, I felt lost in like the very best way you can feel lost, like lost in awe and lost in wonderment, because I loved the work. I felt so connected to the art that I was looking at. And I wanted to know more, and it turns out that Creativity Explored, the gallery there, exhibits work created by artists with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And even though the gallery itself is smallish, I was there close to closing time, and I probably just kept standing there, talking, taking stuff in, and I was invited to peek through these two double doors that opened up into a giant, probably 3,000 square foot working studio, where every day 100 artists with intellectual and developmental disabilities came to work. All adults, artists of all abilities, and they worked together, side by side, practicing, doing their work, getting better every day together. And on one of, I made lots of visits back since then, and on one of the visits, well, I make visits back there because I love to see new work, but I was also really curious about their business model. Like, wow, what is this place, and why doesn't Richmond have a place like this? And so on one of the visits back, I was matched with a studio artist at Creativity Explored, and she was going to serve as kind of my tour guide for the day. And her name is Evelyn. And Evelyn has super short, cropped gray hair. She doesn't say a lot. And still, she is very warm and very welcoming. The only question she asked of me for the whole day was, "What is your favorite Thanksgiving food?" And I was a little thrown off because it was July. And so it turns out Evelyn's favorite Thanksgiving food is carrots. Evelyn loves carrots, and Evelyn loves to draw carrots. And every day, for 5 years, every day when Evelyn would come into the studio to work, Evelyn drew carrots. She has a daily ritual. Her process when she enters the studio is to select 2 sheets of 11 by 17 paper and oil pastels. She works in oil pastels, and she draws carrots. And these are bold, fabulous carrots. It's Evelyns' ritual at the end of every one of her work days that has stuck in my heart ever since. When she's finished, after she's put her supplies away, she sits with her carrots, and then she carefully places each sheet of paper on each arm, and she walks to different points in the studio that are meaningful to her, to honor her work. And it's so reverent, right? To honor your day's work. And even though at the time when I learned that, met Evelyn, I wasn't thinking about this word, inclusive, what I was noticing and really wondering about and like getting excited about is, what is this thoughtful place that creates space, a space for Evelyn to feel so comfortable, so welcome, being herself and being allowed to explore and grow around people who are patient with her and supportive of her doing the work that she was born to do. Okay, sorry. So that stuck with me, and for the next many 6 years, I spent time trying to figure out like how to create a space like this here in Richmond. And one thing I know that's very true for myself, I'm guessing a lot of you are kindred spirits with me, is that I know for sure that the best, most beautiful things that I've ever accomplished have been created in partnership with others. Another way of saying that is like my best work is much bigger than just me, right? It happens when I really include other people, and not just involve other people, but really include them, like include their abilities, include their schedules, include their weirdness, include their wildest dreams. That's when the work gets better. So I gathered up a lot of artist friends here in Richmond, and we got to work. And for the first 2 years that Milk River Arts was around in Richmond, we didn't have our own studio space. We were really lucky. We got to share like the best studio spaces that are here in Richmond in places like the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, like the Visual Arts Center of Richmond, like Studio 23, like 1708 Gallery and Glave Kosin Gallery. I mean, they let us pop up and use their space like studio spaces. And through those years, we met a lot of really interesting people. We met a lot of people who were just curious about what does it mean to be a practicing professional artist. We got excited about that. We got really excited when we met people who identified as having a disability or having a diagnosis, and they were people who were willing and excited to put in the work it takes to be a practicing professional artist. I got excited about like finding a permanent space, a space that we could call our home and kind of shape in our own welcoming way, that felt right and felt like it was full of possibility to have people whose brains work differently than ours, people whose bodies move differently than ours, people who do things that you don't typically see happening in a workplace, a place where they felt comfortable and could grow and feel supported and loved and celebrated for who they are and all their humanness. So maybe I should share some things that you will see. You'll see when you come visit our studio, okay? You will see things like signs that break down the process of setting up and the process of cleaning up into small steps or simple steps so that everyone feels empowered to do that work. You might see artists pacing or rocking back and forth before they feel ready or to prepare themselves to start a new piece or go back into a piece that they've already started and they thought it was finished and we invited them to think otherwise. You will see people who are working on the floor. You might hear someone crying, like at the table, just crying, not hiding in a restroom crying, but there, feeling okay to have that emotion right there. If you're really lucky, you will be there when spontaneous dance just breaks out. For no reason, no music, just happens. So I'm learning, we're all learning through the work and the artists that are practicing their work inside of our studio. We're learning from each other, we're learning a lot. And I wanted to share maybe some of the things that I'm learning from the artists whose portraits you saw, beautiful portraits of our 7 current studio artists. Portraits that were taken by a super talented photographer here in Richmond, Dean Whitbeck. So I'm learning how to move more gracefully in change. Because like I mentioned earlier, like words like special needs, words like disability, words like neurodiversity, they're gonna change. And so just getting comfortable with that, trying to bring my most respectful self to that awareness that things are gonna change and still stepping into that place. One of our artists, as he was painting, was just mumbling these words about change, and they're so beautiful that I had to write them down. It was like, life is always changing. sometimes life changes from beautiful to glorious, and sometimes more beautiful life is coming. I'm learning how to remember people, like not forget people. From the artist whose work is on the postcard that you have today, she, when asked, when she's drawing these crowds of people, you know, who are these people? She says, matter-of-factly, well, these are my friends. These are my friends. And I draw them so that they remain with me forever. And those words, friends, inspired a whole group show that we just had this past February, called These Are My Friends, and They Remain With Me Forever. And it inspired banners and giant puppets and a brass band and this crazy spectacle of a parade up and down Broad Street, because it happened on February 14th, a holiday we like to reimagine as Validation Day. In the process of, in preparation for that day, hundreds of people, some of you are even here and now today, made hundreds of anonymous postcards, love notes that we handed out up and down the street on Broad Street to strangers. So I just, I guess I want to make sure that I leave you with this idea of knowing that this work, this idea of it being inclusive, it means not so much you inviting someone else into the comfort of your own space, but making sure that you are open-hearted and moving in thoughtful, courageous ways that ask someone who's different than you, how can I be comfortable in your space? Because that's the work, right? That's the work. And I hope in the spirit of, inclusiveness that we're in today, unlike infinity, it never ends. I hope it's never ending. So now that you're here, be brave and be every way that you were born to be. Be every way alive. Thanks.